What if I told you there's a branch of science, a chilling consequence of our best understanding of the universe, which suggests you can never truly die? I don't mean your soul goes to an afterlife. I mean you, your consciousness, your awareness, from your own subjective perspective, is doomed to exist forever. This isn't a comforting promise of eternal life. It's the beginning of a horror story, written in the language of mathematics and physics. It's a concept known as quantum immortality, and the journey to understand it will challenge everything you think you know about who you are, what reality is, and the profound value of a life that has an end. Our story begins not in a haunted house, but in the hallowed halls of Princeton University in 1957. Here, a brilliant but rebellious young physicist named Hugh Everett III was wrestling with a ghost that haunted the heart of quantum mechanics, the measurement problem. At the quantum level, particles like electrons exist in a haze of possibilities, a superposition of every potential state at once. But the moment we try to measure one, this cloud of possibilities mysteriously collapses into a single, definite reality. Why? What gives a conscious observer the power to force the universe to make a choice? This question drove physicists to distraction. Everett, however, proposed an idea so audacious, so reality-shattering, that it was initially dismissed as scientific heresy. He asked, what if the universe never chooses at all? What if the wave function never collapses? Instead, at every quantum decision point, reality itself splits. Every single possible outcome happens, each one branching off into its own, separate, parallel universe. Did the electron spin up? Yes, in one universe. Did it spin down? Yes, in another. This elegant but terrifying solution became known as the many worlds interpretation. Everett had solved the measurement problem, but in doing so, he had unknowingly unlocked the door to a philosophical abyss. He had laid the conceptual groundwork for the idea that somewhere, in some branch of reality, a version of you will survive everything. For decades, the many worlds interpretation remained a fascinating but abstract idea. Then, in the 1990s, a physicist named Max Tegmark decided to take Everett's cosmic idea and make it brutally personal. He devised a thought experiment so dark it has become legendary: the quantum suicide experiment. Imagine you are sitting in a chair, facing a gun. This isn't just any gun. It's wired to a quantum device that measures the spin of a particle. If the particle spins clockwise, the gun fires. If it spins counterclockwise, the gun clicks on an empty chamber. Now, according to the many worlds interpretation, each time you pull the trigger, the universe splits. In one reality, the particle spins clockwise, the gun fires, and that version of you is gone. Your family and friends mourn you. The story of your life in that timeline comes to a tragic end. But in the other universe, the particle spins counterclockwise. The gun clicks. You open your eyes, your heart pounding, sweat on your brow, but you are alive. Now, here is the terrifying part. You, your stream of consciousness, can only ever experience the timeline where you survive. The versions of you that die are gone. Their consciousness is extinguished. But from your subjective viewpoint, the gun will always click. You pull the trigger again. The universe splits again. A new version of you perishes, but your awareness continues in the branch where you live. You could do this 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, 1,000,000,000 times. From the outside, you would be seen as the luckiest person in history. But from your perspective, it wouldn't feel like luck. It would simply be the only reality you could ever experience. This leads to a staggering, gut-wrenching conclusion. From your own point of view, you are functionally immortal. You will always find yourself on the branch of reality. No matter how statistically improbable, where you continue to be conscious. This is not a superpower. It's a curse. The horror is just beginning to unfold, because this isn't about peacefully living forever. It's about an existence maintained against all odds, through increasingly bizarre, painful, and reality-bending circumstances that will one day defy all natural explanation. The true terror of quantum immortality isn't about cheating death. It's about what you lose in the process. It's a horror of profound and absolute isolation. Think about it. In the timelines of everyone you have ever known and loved, you will eventually die. Your parents, your partner, your children, your friends, they will experience a reality where you get sick, grow old, or have a fatal accident. They will gather at your funeral. They will share stories. They will grieve for you. And, eventually, they will move on with their lives. Their universe will continue, a universe in which you are a memory. But your consciousness doesn't end with theirs. It continues, alone, on an ever more improbable branch of existence. You are a ghost, not in their world, but in your own. You are cut off from every meaningful connection you've ever had. Because the people you see are no longer the same people who shared a common history with your now dead counterparts. They are quantum duplicates, and the shared reality that once bound you together has been severed. You inhabit a universe that has mourned you and moved on without you. Can you imagine the loneliness? To watch the people you love live lives that are fundamentally disconnected from your own, knowing that in their real world, you are long gone. Even Max Tegmark, the architect of the quantum suicide experiment, had his reservations. He argued that the slow, gradual process of biological death, with its millions of individual cell failures, muddies the waters. It's not a single gunshot moment, but a slow decay that might not allow for this clean split. But that argument does little to quiet the deep philosophical vertigo the theory induces. It raises a terrifying question about the continuity of your own identity. If your consciousness is being preserved through a series of quantum miracles, is the person who survives a car crash truly the same person who got in the car? Or are you just a quantum echo, a survivor who inherits the memories of countless dead selves, forever haunted by the ghosts of the lives you failed to live? To truly grasp the horror, we need to understand the mechanics of this survival. In quantum mechanics, every possible outcome has something called a probability amplitude. Think of it as its mathematical weight or substance in the multiverse. Common, everyday events have a high amplitude. They are thick with reality. Wildly improbable events, like surviving a fall from a skyscraper, have an infinitesimally small amplitude. With each improbable survival, your consciousness is shunted into a branch of reality that is mathematically thinner, less substantial. As the philosopher Dr. Peter Lewis describes it, you become probabilistically ghost-like. You are a phantom haunting the frayed, outer edges of existence. You are still conscious, but your reality has less weight, less realness than the worlds where you died a more probable death. You are an anomaly, a statistical outlier that the universe must grudgingly accommodate. This leads to a fundamental crisis of self, a problem explored by the philosopher Derek Parfit. Parfit challenged our intuitive notion of a single, continuous self. In the context of quantum immortality, this becomes a nightmare. If, at every moment, countless versions of you are dying, is the consciousness that continues in the survival branch truly you? Or is it merely a quantum descendant, a lucky survivor who just happens to share the memories of the person you were a moment ago? The feeling of being you might just be an illusion. A memory chain passed from one quantum copy to the next, while the real yous have perished 1,000,000,000,000 times over. You are no longer a person. You are a legacy of dead selves. A flicker of awareness at the end of an infinitely long chain of death. If the philosophical horror isn't enough, The physical reality of a quantum immortal existence is where the true terror lies. Physicists refer to this process as the degradation cascade. Your consciousness is preserved, yes, but the theory says nothing about preserving your health, your dignity, or your sanity. As your body naturally ages, as your organs begin to fail, as diseases take root, the quantum interventions required to keep you conscious would have to become more and more extreme. Imagine your heart stopping. In the vast majority of realities, you die. But your consciousness continues in the 1 in a trillion branch where perhaps a random quantum fluctuation in your heart muscles causes it to spontaneously restart. It's a miracle, but a grotesque one. Next, a cancerous tumor riddles your brain. In most worlds, your cognitive functions cease. But your awareness continues in the branch where, against all biological possibility, the tumor's growth halts, or your brain somehow rewires itself around the damage. The result is not a graceful immortality. It's an existence of unimaginable suffering. Your consciousness could be preserved in a state of fragmented agony, your body a patchwork of improbable repairs, your mind deteriorating but being prevented by quantum chance from ever fully shutting down. You are trapped in a decaying vessel, kept alive by a series of increasingly horrific miracles. Furthermore, this process would create what are known as anthropic shadows. The very laws of physics would appear to bend and warp around you to ensure your survival. You would find yourself living in a bubble of impossibility. A fall that should have killed you results in only a broken bone. A disease that should have been terminal vanishes overnight. The world would become more and more contrived, more and more unbelievable, with each passing moment. You are no longer a participant in reality. You are the reason reality is breaking. You are trapped in a prison of your own survival. The implications of this terrifying idea soon expand from the personal to the cosmic. It all comes down to something called the observer selection effect. Your continued existence isn't a passive experience. It is an active process of selecting for and shaping the realities that allow for your survival. You are filtering the multiverse, experiencing only the incredibly rare branches where you persist. Now, what happens if this principle applies not just to you, but to every conscious being in the universe? Each observer becomes a filter, their consciousness demanding the continuation of realities that support it. Reality itself becomes a fantastically complex intersection of countless probability bubbles, each one centered around a single, immortal observer. This leads to what some have called the reality saturation problem. The universe becomes so heavily constrained by the mathematical requirement to preserve all of these observers that it can no longer evolve naturally. The cosmos becomes frozen, locked into an artificial, gridlocked state by the intersecting demands of 1 trillion immortal consciousnesses. The flow of time, the evolution of galaxies, the very laws of physics could become calcified. Unable to proceed naturally, because doing so would terminate one of the observers it is required to sustain. The universe ceases to be a dynamic, living cosmos and becomes a static museum, a monument to the impossible burden of maintaining infinite consciousness. Living in such a universe, contemplating this cosmic burden, leads to a profound philosophical sickness, the authenticity crisis. If your entire reality, the air you breathe, the people you meet, the stars you see, an artificial construct, a stage play engineered solely for your survival, does your life retain any meaning? Is love real if the person you love is merely a quantum puppet whose existence is required to keep you sane? Is achievement meaningful if the universe contorts itself to ensure your success? The economist and futurist Dr. Robin Hanson uses a chilling term for such beings: reality parasites. In this view, an immortal observer is not a hero of their own story, but a cosmic burden, consuming vast, untold resources from the multiverse simply to continue their existence. Every improbable survival is a drain on the cosmic system, a deviation from the natural flow of probability. This could even lead to a heat-death acceleration problem. The energy and complexity required to constantly generate and maintain these life-sustaining, improbable realities could be immense, potentially draining the universe of its vitality at an accelerated rate. You are not just a passive observer. You are actively contributing to the exhaustion and eventual death of the cosmos, all for the sake of your own continued, meaningless existence. And perhaps the most unsettling possibility of all is that we are already living in such a reality. How would we know? How could we ever distinguish between a natural, authentic universe and a quantum mechanical illusion curated just for us? The knowledge, or even the suspicion, of one's own quantum immortality presents a profound and immediate psychological danger. For one, it creates a moral hazard problem. If you truly believe you cannot die from your own perspective, why wouldn't you take insane risks? Why would normal ethical considerations about self-preservation apply? The consequences could be monstrous. But far more terrifying is the fact that the theory is, from a subjective perspective, completely unfalsifiable. It's a perfect, logical trap. Every single time you have a close call, every near miss in traffic, every illness you recover from, every moment you should have died but didn't act as a piece of confirming evidence. Your entire life becomes a dataset that seems to prove the theory correct. It creates a self-reinforcing delusion from which there is no escape. The longer you live, the more evidence you accumulate, and the deeper you fall into the trap. This trap implies something deeply disturbing about the nature of consciousness itself. For quantum immortality to work, your consciousness must be something more than a mere product of the brain's biochemistry. It must be something that can transcend physical death. Something that can jump from a dying brain in one reality to a living one in another. This opens up a Pandora's box of even more disturbing possibilities about the fluid, fragile, and perhaps terrifyingly non-local nature of personal identity. The idea that consciousness can seamlessly jump between realities to avoid death is a neat and tidy concept. But it presents a chilling alternative. What if the jump isn't clean? What if the process is messy? This leads to the possibility of the fragmentation of consciousness. Imagine your sense of self, your I, not as a single point, but as a complex, fragile vessel. In the violent moment of a reality split, that vessel could shatter. Your awareness might not just transfer to one reality, it could splinter, with pieces of your consciousness ending up scattered across different branches of the multiverse. In this scenario, your identity would dissolve into a horrifying cacophony of contradictory experiences. One fragment of your awareness might be experiencing the reality where you survived the car crash, feeling the pain of broken bones. Another fragment could be in a timeline where you are in a coma, experiencing a dark, dreamlike state. And another could be in a world where you suffered brain damage, your thoughts confused and incoherent. You would cease to be a singular you and become a fractured chorus of conflicting selves, experiencing multiple, incompatible realities simultaneously. This highlights a core conceptual problem with the entire theory. There is no known physical mechanism that could possibly facilitate such a transfer of awareness, fragmented or otherwise. Causality, as we understand it, is contained within each universe. For your consciousness to know that it needs to jump and then somehow cross the impenetrable barrier between realities would require it to behave in ways that seem less like physics and more like magic. It demands a consciousness that is inconsistent with everything we currently understand about the fundamental workings of the mind and the universe. Even as we spiral through these existential horrors, it is crucial to understand that modern science and philosophy offer powerful, compelling arguments against this entire concept. These critiques are not just comforting, They are intellectually devastating to the theory. First, the philosopher of physics, Dr. David Wallace, argues that the very idea commits a fundamental probability fallacy. Quantum immortality requires your consciousness to have access to information across causally isolated realities. It has to know which branch to follow. But this is impossible. Each parallel universe is its own self-contained reality. There is no communication between them. Consciousness cannot choose to follow the surviving path because it has no knowledge of the other paths. You don't ride the wave of survival. You are simply the version that exists on that wave, while another version of you, equally real, exists on the wave that crashes. Furthermore, modern neuroscience provides what may be the most powerful rebuttal. As championed by figures like neurophilosopher Dr. Patricia Churchland, the overwhelming evidence suggests that consciousness is not a transferable thing, not a soul, not a ghost, not a quantum data file. It is an emergent process that is inseparably linked to the physical substrate of the brain. Consciousness is what the brain does. It's a verb, not a noun. When the brain is destroyed, the process of consciousness simply stops. Just as the process of digestion stops when the stomach is removed. There is nothing to transfer, nothing to jump. The light doesn't go somewhere else, it simply goes out. The scientific critique deepens when we confront the continuity of identity crisis from another angle. Even if we were to grant the premise of a surviving branch of reality, quantum immortality doesn't actually promise your survival. It promises the creation of a quantum duplicate in a timeline where you live. The original Utah person who faced the quantum gun perishes. What continues is merely a perfect copy, an imposter who inherits your memories and believes it is you. Think of it like the teleporter paradox. If a machine scans your body, destroys it, and then reassembles a perfect copy of you on Mars, is the person on Mars really you? Or did you die in the scanner, only to be replaced by a convincing counterfeit? Most philosophers would argue the latter. Quantum immortality offers the same grim bargain. You don't cheat death. You are simply replaced, and your death is experienced by a version of you who will never know they were the original. Beyond this staggering philosophical problem, the theory's mathematical foundations crumble under what physicists call the measure problem. In an infinite multiverse where every possible outcome occurs, traditional probability becomes meaningless. If everything happens, what does it mean to say one outcome is more probable than another? Without a coherent way to assign weights or probabilities to different branches, any predictions about which reality your consciousness might experience become scientifically unreliable, unprovable, and ultimately unfalsifiable speculation. Perhaps the most straightforward and damning criticism of all is that the entire terrifying edifice of quantum immortality rests upon one highly speculative and unproven idea: the many worlds interpretation. It's crucial to remember that many worlds is just one of many ways physicists have proposed to understand the bizarre rules of quantum mechanics. Other widely accepted interpretations, like the classic Copenhagen interpretation or the de Broglie bomb model, do not require the existence of parallel universes at all. In these models, the wave function genuinely does collapse. The universe does make a choice, and there is only one reality. If these interpretations are correct, then quantum immortality is not just unlikely. It is flatly impossible. There are no other branches for your consciousness to escape to. This firmly places quantum immortality in the realm of metaphysics, not science. It is a fascinating philosophical game, but it is not a testable scientific hypothesis. From a subjective viewpoint, the theory remains an evidential trap. Because you can only ever observe outcomes where you survive. You can never gather evidence to disprove it from your personal experience. This makes it more akin to a belief system, a kind of scientific solipsism that is immune to falsification and therefore, by definition, outside the bounds of science. Even if we suspend all disbelief, even if quantum immortality were scientifically and philosophically possible, it faces one final, devastating hurdle. It promises a fate no conscious being would ever desire. The theory requires constant localized violations of fundamental physical laws, like the conservation of energy, to facilitate its miracles. But more importantly, it offers a vision of eternity that is not a heaven, but a hell. As philosophers like Dr. Thomas Nagel have argued, a life without end loses the very limitations that give it shape, meaning, urgency, and value. Our mortality is not a flaw to be corrected. It is the framework upon which we build our lives. The knowledge that our time is finite is what motivates us to create, to love, to strive, to make our mark. An endless life would eventually dilute every experience to the point of meaninglessness. The philosopher Dr. Bernard Williams gave this state a name: categorical boredom. It is an endless existence where all possibilities for genuine novelty, for authentic experience, have been exhausted. After 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, 1,000,000,000 years, what new joys could there be? What new knowledge could truly surprise you? What relationship could possibly sustain itself? You would be doomed to an eternity of repetition, a cosmic Groundhog Day from which there is no escape. It is a curse of infinite duration, a fate far, far worse than a natural and timely death. Modern neuroscience offers what may be the most profound and elegant critique of the entire concept, dismantling it at its very core. The theory of quantum immortality fundamentally assumes that consciousness is a single, unified entity, a little me, sitting in the control room of the brain that can be preserved and transferred. However, decades of research from pioneering neuroscientists like Dr. Antonio Damasio and Dr. Michael Gazzaniga, famous for his work with split-brain patients, have demonstrated that this is a powerful illusion. Consciousness is not a single point of light. It is a collection of multiple, parallel, and distributed processes happening all over the brain. There is no central self to be found, no single pilot to jump between realities. Your sense of being a unified self is a story the brain tells itself, a brilliant trick of integration to create a coherent narrative. This modular, fragmented, and distributed nature of our own awareness makes the idea of a coherent consciousness transfer not just physically implausible, but conceptually incoherent. What part of the committee gets to make the jump? The language module. The emotional center. The visual cortex. The idea of a single you surviving is based on a folk psychology that has been thoroughly dismantled by science. There is no ghost in the machine to save. Ultimately, the enduring power and horror of quantum immortality may not lie in whether the theory is literally true, but in what the concept itself reveals about the profound limits of human understanding. The philosopher, Dr. Colin McGinn, has proposed a concept he calls cognitive closure. He suggests that there are certain problems and consciousness may be the ultimate example, that our brains are simply not evolved to solve, just as a dog is not evolved to understand calculus. The terror we feel when contemplating quantum immortality stems from this very limitation. It's the violent collision between our evolved, intuitive sense of a single, continuous self that persists through time, and the utterly alien, probabilistic mathematics of quantum mechanics. We are trying to apply a 100,000-year-old user interface our sense of self to a system that operates on rules that defy all common sense. The theory, then, serves as a dark mirror. It reflects back at us our own profound ignorance about the true nature of our existence. The horror is the feeling of our intuition breaking, of our most fundamental assumptions about reality dissolving into a quantum haze. Just as the scientific and philosophical critiques seem to offer a comforting escape hatch, we confront the most chilling, mind-bending twist of all, the disproof paradox. Imagine for a moment that you are a quantum immortal being, already living in a reality curated for your survival. If your continued consciousness requires a certain level of sanity and coherence, wouldn't it be beneficial for the universe to provide you with convincing arguments against the theory? If believing in your own horrifying immortality would drive you mad, and madness would lead to the termination of your consciousness, then the path of least resistance for the multiverse would be to create a world filled with brilliant scientists and philosophers who convincingly debunk the idea. In this terrifyingly elegant logical loop, every piece of evidence against quantum immortality paradoxically becomes potential evidence for it. Every rational argument, every scientific paper, every shred of neuroscience could be interpreted as part of the simulation. A form of quantum mechanical gaslighting designed to obscure your true, inescapable situation. Rational inquiry itself becomes a tool of your prison. How could you ever trust your own conclusions again? This disproof paradox forces us to question the very authenticity of reality. But it also opens the door to another, even grander, possibility. What if we've been looking at consciousness all wrong? What if it isn't an accidental byproduct of evolution, a temporary fluke confined to biological brains? What if consciousness is a conserved quantity in the universe, as fundamental as energy or momentum? If awareness is a fundamental feature of reality, then its tendency to persist through the branching pathways of quantum mechanics might not be a horrifying anomaly, but a natural law. This reframes our entire existence. Your sense of being a single, continuous self could be the ultimate illusion. Every single moment of your awareness might be a tiny quantum continuation, a microscopic resurrection in a slightly different branch of reality. You are not a person who might one day become a quantum immortal. You have been one since the moment you were born. Even if we accept this grand vision of consciousness as a universal constant, the horror simply shifts its form. It moves from the mechanism to the meaning. Such an existence would amplify what the philosopher Dr. Thomas Nagel called the absurdity of existence. You are trapped in an endless life where all ultimate meaning evaporates. Your relationships, the cornerstones of a meaningful life, would inevitably degrade into artificial performances. After a few centuries, the people you love would be gone. You might find new companions, but they would be probability shadows. Pale imitations of the real people who died in more probable worlds. This relationship degradation cascade would lead to a cosmic loneliness, an absolute and eternal isolation beyond anything the human mind was ever built to endure. You would be the last person at a party that never ends, surrounded by strangers wearing the faces of your long-dead friends. In a universe where consciousness is eternal, it is only logical to assume that suffering might be equally persistent. This opens the door to the truly unspeakable concept of quantum suffering pain that echoes across infinite realities, becoming, from your perspective, literally eternal. The natural degradation of the body would proceed without the mercy of death to end it. Your awareness would be trapped in a failing machine, experiencing an endless catalog of age, disease, and decay. Furthermore, your very experience of time itself could fracture and break. To avoid the final termination of your awareness, reality might become stuck, trapping you in quantum temporal prisons. The universe might recycle past moments, forcing you to relive the same experiences, perhaps your most painful, traumatic ones, in an endless, horrifying loop. Because creating a new future is more probabilistically costly than repeating the past. An existence without end is, by definition, an existence without hope. Hope is the belief that a fundamental change in one's situation is possible. But if you cannot die, if you cannot escape the quantum mechanical maintenance of your own awareness, then your fundamental situation is immutable. hope becomes a logical impossibility. This leads to a state of what could be called metaphysical despair. This stands in stark and horrifying contrast to nearly all spiritual and religious traditions, which seek transcendence, enlightenment, and union with a greater reality. Quantum immortality offers the precise opposite, the ultimate spiritual nightmare. It locks consciousness into an isolated, individual perspective forever, with no possibility for growth, connection, or release. It is the definitive damnation of the self. Our very act of contemplating these ideas, of wrestling with this horror, forces us to confront a profound truth about our place in the cosmos. We are not detached observers of reality, looking in from the outside. As the legendary physicist John Wheeler suggested, we live in a participatory universe. Our observations, our questions, our very consciousness might play a role in shaping the reality we experience. In this light, our exploration of quantum immortality might be part of the very phenomenon it describes. We become trapped in a strange loop, a term coined by Douglas Hofstadter, where the observer and the observed are inextricably entangled. By thinking about this theory, are we somehow strengthening the reality in which it is a relevant concept? We are not just studying a theory. We may be living out its implications through the very process of trying to understand it. Perhaps the only way out of this paradoxical labyrinth is to reconsider the nature of consciousness itself one last time. There is an ancient philosophical idea, now gaining traction among some physicists and philosophers, known as pan. This is the view that awareness is not confined to individual brains, but is a fundamental, ubiquitous property of the universe itself. In this view, consciousness doesn't need to jump between realities because it is already everywhere. If this is true, then the horror we feel may be misplaced. The fear may not be of an endless individual life, but the individual ego's primal terror at the prospect of its own dissolution. What if death is not an end, but a rejoining? A returning of our localized drop of awareness back into the universal ocean of consciousness. The horror of quantum immortality, then, is the horror of being denied that final, peaceful dissolution. If we are indeed localized expressions of a universal consciousness, then quantum immortality could be reinterpreted in one final, terrifying way as a form of cosmic ego death. It is a forced, violent surrender of the individual identity that we hold so dear. Unlike the gradual, intentional process of transcendence sought in mystical traditions, this happens without our consent, without our understanding, and without our control. Our terror stems from this absolute lack of agency. The theory's very incomprehensibility might be a feature, not a bug, a cosmic paradox so profound it is designed to shatter our attachment to the rational mind, to our sense of self, and to open us to realities that lie far beyond our ability to comprehend. In the final analysis, our long, dark journey through the quantum shadows leaves us not with concrete answers, but with a transformed and deepened appreciation for our own beautifully finite existence. The intellectual and emotional terror the theory inspires serves a powerful purpose. It reveals the profound value of mortality. It is the deadline of death that gives urgency to our love, meaning to our choices, and preciousness to every fleeting moment. Whether quantum immortality is a reality or a fiction, the fact that we, as human beings, can even contemplate such ideas is a testament to the extraordinary, bizarre, and wonderful nature of consciousness. We are, in a very real sense, the universe becoming aware of itself. And in the face of that profound, humbling, and perhaps unsolvable mystery, the only authentic response is not fear, but wonder, humility, and a deep, abiding gratitude for the miracle of being conscious, right here, right now, in this world, for a little while. This journey teaches us to embrace the life we have, with all its imperfections and its inevitable end. To live more fully, love more deeply, and not take a single sunrise for granted. The horror story of quantum immortality contains a beautiful moral. The greatest gift of life is that it is not forever. What are your thoughts on this? Does the idea of quantum immortality comfort you or terrify you? And what do you believe happens to our consciousness when we die? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the unknown. I wish you all the very best of health and peace of mind. If you enjoyed this journey and want to explore more of life's biggest questions, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps more than you know. Until next time.